In the spring of 1829, a tenant farmer working the fields near the Delaware-Maryland border made a discovery that would expose one of America's most chilling criminal enterprises. His plow horse suddenly sank into the earth, revealing a wooden chest buried beneath the soil. Inside lay the skeletal remains of what appeared to be a man, his bones yellowed with age and his skull showing clear signs of violence. This was just the beginning. Over the following weeks, authorities would uncover the bodies of at least 7 people on this property, including 3 children, all victims of a woman whose name had already become a whispered terror throughout the Delmarva Peninsula, Martha "Patty" Cannon. For nearly 2 decades, Cannon had operated what historians now call the Reverse Underground Railroad, a network that kidnapped free African Americans and escaped slaves to sell them back into bondage in the Deep South. But this wasn't just about human trafficking. Cannon was also a serial killer who murdered rival slave traders, witnesses, and even children when they posed a threat to her operations. Court records from Sussex County, Delaware, show she was indicted for 4 murders, though witnesses claimed the true number exceeded 20. Before we continue with the story of Patty Cannon and her reign of terror along the Mason-Dixon line, I want to hear from you. What state or city are you listening from? The reach of Cannon's criminal network extended far beyond her Delaware stronghold, touching communities from Philadelphia to the Mississippi Delta. Leave a comment and let me know where you're hearing this story. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell. These dark chapters of American history deserve to be remembered. The discovery of those buried remains would ultimately unravel a criminal conspiracy that had operated with virtual impunity for over a decade, protected by jurisdictional confusion, racial prejudice, and the simple fact that most of its victims were people whose disappearances went largely unnoticed by white society. The area where Patty Cannon built her empire of terror was uniquely suited for criminal activity. In the early 1800s, the region now known as Reliance sat at the intersection of 3 jurisdictions, Sussex County in Delaware and Caroline and Dorchester counties in Maryland. This strategic location allowed criminals to literally step across county and state lines to escape pursuing lawmen. The spot was so remote that locals called it Johnson's Crossroads, named for the tavern that would become the headquarters of the most notorious kidnapping ring in American history. The landscape itself seemed designed for concealment. Dense forests of pine and oak stretched for miles, broken only by marshy lowlands and small clearings where isolated farmsteads dotted the countryside. The Nanticoke River wound through the region, providing waterways that could transport captives silently under cover of darkness. Roads were little more than cart paths, and the nearest substantial towns were days away by horseback. For someone seeking to operate outside the law, it was an ideal location. Martha Cannon, called Patty by those who knew her, had arrived in this borderland sometime around 1790. Court records suggest she was born around 1760, possibly under the name Lucretia Patricia Hanley, though she kept her origins deliberately vague. Some accounts place her birth in Canada, with immigration to Delaware at age 16. What is documented is her marriage to Jesse Cannon, a local farmer who owned property near the state line. Together they had at least 1 daughter and lived what appeared to be an unremarkable rural life. Jesse Cannon was described by neighbors as a quiet man who kept to himself, working his small farm and raising tobacco and corn like dozens of other settlers in the region. The Cannon homestead sat on a modest plot of land that straddled the Delaware-Maryland border, a detail that would prove crucial to Patty's later criminal activities. The house itself was a simple 2-story structure, built in the common style of the period with thick wooden walls and small windows. What neighbors didn't know was that this seemingly ordinary home would soon house secret rooms and hidden spaces designed to conceal kidnapped human beings. But beneath this veneer of normalcy lay something far darker. The early 1800s marked a crucial period in American slavery. When Congress banned the importation of enslaved people from Africa in 1808, the demand for human labor in the expanding cotton fields of Alabama, Mississippi, and Georgia created a lucrative domestic market. A healthy adult slave who might have cost $300 before the ban now sold for over $1,000 in the Deep South. This price surge created powerful incentives for criminals willing to traffic in human misery. The economic transformation of the South following the invention of the cotton gin had created an insatiable demand for enslaved labor. Cotton production was expanding rapidly across the Gulf Coast states, and planters were willing to pay premium prices for workers. The legal ban on importing slaves from Africa meant that the only source of new enslaved people was the domestic population, either through natural increase or through the capture and re-enslavement of free African Americans. The Delmarva Peninsula was particularly vulnerable to these predators. Following the Revolutionary War, many enslaved people had been freed by their owners, either through gradual emancipation laws or individual acts of manumission. Maryland and Delaware had substantial populations of free African Americans who worked as laborers, artisans, and small farmers. These communities, while legally free, lived in constant fear. They had no powerful protectors, limited legal recourse, and their disappearances often went unreported or uninvestigated by white authorities who viewed them as less than fully human. The legal status of free African Americans in the early 1800s was precarious at best. While they were not enslaved, they possessed few of the rights enjoyed by white citizens. They could not vote, serve on juries, or testify against white defendants in most courts. Their freedom could be challenged at any time, and they were required to carry papers proving their status. For criminals like Patty Cannon, these legal vulnerabilities created opportunities for exploitation. Into this environment stepped Patty Cannon, a woman who would prove that evil recognizes no gender boundaries. Contemporary accounts describe her as a large, physically imposing woman with unusual strength for her gender. She stood nearly 6 feet tall in an era when most women barely reached 5 feet, and she possessed what neighbors described as an intimidating presence. Her voice was reportedly deep and commanding, and she had a reputation for violent outbursts when crossed. Her husband Jesse died under mysterious circumstances around 1826. Some later claimed she poisoned him, leaving her a widow with complete control over the family property. By this time, she had already